The only sound that reached him was the distant, haunting wail of sirens, a noise that seemed to be echoing directly inside his skull. In his famous eyes, there was no celebrity glint of outrage, only a quiet, deep, and unbearable chill of pain. The air around him was heavy with rising tension, thick and still, the kind that precedes a major electrical storm. The recording indicator on his personal cell phone, held steady in his hand, did not waver, capturing his every strained breath and the awful stillness of the moment. His face, usually so expressive on screen, was now a mask, suspended between sheer shock and a slow, creeping surge of cold anger. He took one measured step forward, and his voice failed him, breaking, not in a loud cry of despair, but in an utter, absolute lack of volume. They truly did this. The whisper was swallowed immediately by the fog, heard by no one but himself. He didn't even attempt to retrieve the sheaf of notarized documents from his briefcase, papers which weighed less than his custom-made gold watch, but had cost him a full quarter of his entire fortune. Near the rickety, unstable fence, painted an appealing, patchy shade of green that had surrendered to the wind and corrosive time, a small, laminated slip of paper was crudely attached. He approached it, his imposing shadow falling over the small, vulnerable note. The unwelcome sensation of hot, cheap concrete pressing through the thin, expensive leather soles of his designer dress shoes was the single, solitary sensory input confirming the reality of this entire, surreal scene. The handwriting on the note was sloppy, but the message itself was horrifyingly distinct. It contained only one, short, brutal sentence, applied with a heavy black marker, a sentence Michael would realize he would never be able to forget for the rest of his life. "You didn't even listen to what I told you, Nick." A moment of pure silence followed. Then, the imagined, internal explosion of digital noise. Likes, shouts, comments, the sound of social media hysteria. Everything had been instantly, and perfectly, forced out of his control. But to fully comprehend how Michael B. Jordan, the paragon of quiet success, found himself trapped at the very epicenter of Hollywood's loudest financial and racial scandal, a conspiracy that reached into the deepest, most corrupt organs of Los Angeles city governance, we must rewind the clock a few significant months. Michael B. Jordan was never the type of actor who actively sought flashes of light or disruptive chaos. His strength, the true secret to his longevity and profound success, lay in intense focus, consistent effort, and quiet, meticulous work, all deliberately hidden from the incessant eyes of the public. He never desired houses that screamed of excessive wealth. His deepest ambition was for a legacy, a rock-solid foundation, a secure place where his family could settle and live without being subjected to the constant, invasive glare of the paparazzi. He wanted a sanctuary, a location that spoke of true, earned success, not loudly, but deeply, with philosophical weight and gravity. Just 2 months prior, he had been sitting comfortably in a small, independent coffee shop, safely tucked away between an old municipal library and an automotive repair garage, a place where no one ever thought to take his picture. He sipped his morning coffee slowly, engaging in a genuine, unhurried conversation with a young man from the neighborhood who held an earnest dream of becoming a professional boxer, listening to the young hopeful not like a remote celebrity, but like a deeply invested director planning his next big project. His actions, in every area of his life, were meticulously engineered to equal his underlying principles. Only recently, he had quietly and anonymously funded the extensive repair and full renovation of a dilapidated boxing gym in his childhood neighborhood, a fact no tabloid or celebrity news outlet would ever discover. He was not merely an actor, he was a man who vividly remembered, honored, and supported the community he had come from. It was during this period of quiet philanthropy and career contemplation that he was introduced to Mr. Sterling, a real estate broker whose very name sounded like the pure, ringing chime of old money. Sterling was far more than a simple intermediary. He openly marketed himself as a sophisticated curator of bespoke, generational properties for the ultra-wealthy, constantly boasting of a sprawling network of deeply entrenched political connections that supposedly reached into the very deepest, most powerful echelons of the Los Angeles City Council. When Sterling first presented the concept of the Aurelian, a unique, ultra-private, and camera-invisible villa with an aggressively modern design intended to blend seamlessly with the natural landscape, Michael felt a genuine sense of optimism and hope. The Aurelian was pitched as more than just a house. It was a profound statement of architectural philosophy, a solemn promise of unparalleled privacy and superior security, designed and built to function literally as a modern, impenetrable fortress. The entire project existed solely as incredibly detailed, highly seductive digital models and meticulous architectural blueprints, which Sterling proudly referred to as the property's immutable digital twin. According to Sterling's assurances, the villa was already partially constructed, but its physical location was supposedly so sensitive to privacy concerns that actual, physical site inspections were strictly prohibited until the final, definitive contract closure, citing extremely high-level security protocols and the prevention of any intellectual property leakage regarding its exclusive design. Michael, himself a man who intensely valued his privacy and seclusion, understood and accepted this highly unusual condition. This acceptance marked his initial, and ultimately not his last, display of trust, a foundational quality he genuinely believed was a source of strength, not a critical weakness. He executed the wire transfer, a staggering $150 million deposited directly into Sterling's designated account. This monumental investment represented more to him than just currency. It was a profound, quiet statement about the scale of his success, a statement intended to be spoken not loudly, but with enduring, quiet conviction. In stark contrast, the city of Los Angeles operated under its own secretive, deeply entrenched rules Michael had not even begun to comprehend. All the voluminous documents he had meticulously signed were designed to appear legally flawless, but only upon a cursory, surface-level examination. They painstakingly detailed the concept of the Aurelian, including its unique, aspirational features and design specifications. But when it came to the critical physical address and the specific legal description of the land parcel itself, they contained only deliberately vague, generic cadastral numbers. While Michael was being actively seduced by the flawless, breathtaking digital twin, Sterling's team of lawyers was simultaneously, and quietly, selling him only the bare, legally encumbered plot of soil underneath the proposed structure. The tension began its slow, inevitable ascent the very next morning, immediately following Michael's initial, shocking discovery. He immediately placed a controlled call to Mr. Sterling. The voice that eventually answered the phone was slick, superficially reassuring, and utterly devoid of genuine concern. "Mr. Jordan, sir, congratulations on finalizing the purchase. How are you enjoying your new neighborhood, ma'am?" Sterling sounded like he was truly savoring every syllable of the moment. His cultivated Southern accent, which had initially been perceived as charming and trustworthy, now sounded like cold, utterly manipulative music, a calculated performance. "Mr. Sterling, I am currently standing directly in front of the address that is meticulously detailed in the closing documents." Michael's voice remained consciously low and perfectly controlled, the effort palpable. "There is no villa here. There is only an old, dilapidated bungalow and a lot full of construction debris. And affixed to the fence, a deeply offensive, hate-filled message." Sterling laughed dismissively, a loud, grating, and utterly fake sound. "Ah, that must be just a paperwork hiccup, Mr. Jordan. We are experiencing some minor zoning conflicts, but this is a perfectly common occurrence in large-scale luxury development. The villa will be constructed eventually. For now, there is simply an old structure that needs to be properly demolished. This is absolutely not your area of responsibility, sir. Do not fret. We will take care of all the necessary details. Michael instantly realized that his genuine good intentions were slamming headfirst into a monolithic wall of bureaucratic indifference and pure, unapologetic arrogance. His intuition, honed over years of intensely reading and analyzing people's unspoken motives on and off a film set, screamed a loud, internal warning of betrayal and deceit. No, sir. The binding documents I signed clearly and explicitly describe a fully completed, ready-to-move-in villa. I did not purchase a mere parcel of land with minor zoning conflicts, as you put it. I purchased the finalized, signature property known as the Aurelian Dot. Sterling's entire demeanor instantly froze, his tone shifting abruptly from friendly collaborator to controlled, superior adversary. Mr. Jordan, quite frankly, people like you don't typically want to hear bad news. As of this moment, you are the lawful, registered owner of the land parcel. All those magnificent blueprints were explicitly included as a mere conceptual rendering. If you had meticulously reviewed Addendum C, Subclause 4.1, as advised. He let the implication hang in the dead air. Michael's realization was sharp and definitive. This was no simple mistake. This was a deliberate, premeditated abuse of entrenched power, expertly shielded behind layers of impenetrable bureaucracy. The weeks that followed became a brutal, protracted test of his quiet, principled persistence. He immediately enlisted the most expensive, most highly regarded legal team available, but their every strategic move met an invisible, seemingly insurmountable wall. His lawyers quickly discovered that Sterling and his son, Sterling Jr., were deeply embedded within a well-organized network that had perfected this digital twin scam on multiple occasions. They would sell the idea of an exclusive property to specific, high-net-worth investors who prioritized utmost confidentiality above all else, and then exploit legal loopholes to transfer only the abstract, raw cadastral plot, often one that was already heavily encumbered with local restrictions. Michael, who had always meticulously avoided any hint of public scandal, now faced a profound and difficult dilemma. His entire public relations team demanded immediate, aggressive action to leverage his millions of social media followers to publicly destroy Sterling and demand immediate justice. Michael, we can absolutely dismantle them on Twitter in under an hour. They will never withstand the public pressure, his frustrated manager pleaded, his voice cracking with urgency. This is $150 million at stake. But Michael remained resolute in his refusal. A philosophical conviction, one he had long held close, echoed loudly in his internal monologue. To act rightly, even when absolutely no one is watching. If I exploit my fame now, this will be a victory of loud force, not the quiet, enduring truth. It will degenerate into a circus. My goal is to see them punished by the cold, impartial letter of the law, not by the fickle whims of an easily manipulated mob. He felt the quiet, steady hum of his deepest personal principles waging a painful internal battle against the overwhelming, deafening noise and demand of the Hollywood publicity machine. He began conducting his own quiet, meticulous investigation. He visited the City Council archives, filed extensive Freedom of Information Act requests with the zoning department, and spent long, solitary hours analyzing the dense, cryptic blueprints. It was during this intensely focused, self-directed research that the initial subtle warning signs began to appear, tiny cracks in the facade. First, the power in his temporary rented apartment was abruptly and inexplicably cut off for an entire day, even though the surrounding blocks and buildings maintained full service. He initially dismissed this as merely the sound of the building's air conditioning unit failing, but upon closer inspection, the unit was turned completely off, and the low-frequency humming, similar to a muffled drone, was clearly emanating from the HVAC ventilation shaft outside his unit. Then, his assistant, during a casual conversation, inadvertently mentioned that Sterling Jr. had once let slip a cryptic comment during the early negotiations about a protected space within the old bungalow, a space containing an old, heavily rusted safe vault that appeared on none of the official construction plans. Michael slowly realized that his ethical, well-intended persistence was not just meeting bureaucratic indifference. It was actively provoking the malicious, retaliatory anger of the architects of the scheme. The individuals opposing him behaved with increasing confidence, displaying an almost untouchable arrogance. Sterling threatened immediate countersuits for defamation if Michael made any public statement. "We absolutely will not permit the devaluation of our professional relationships, sir." His prepared remarks sounded like cold manifestos. "We operate entirely within the legal framework, and you cannot simply use your platform to target us without consequence." Michael felt a profound, escalating sense of frustration, yet he meticulously maintained his self-control. His internal, growing conviction that something was fundamentally wrong intensified, but he continued to strive to remain rational and within the law. His professional isolation was escalating. His longtime producer friends began actively avoiding conversations when he mentioned Sterling's name. The principled hero was rapidly becoming known as the unwelcome truth-teller, a pariah. Weeks later, Michael arrived alone at his disputed property once more. The legal documents unequivocally confirmed this was, indisputably, his land. He possessed every legal right to be there, and to explore his own property. His attention was drawn to a new, unsettling visual symbol of danger, lying discarded on the ground. Near the bungalow's entrance was a broken, rain-speckled, and very old plaque. It resembled the type of markers commonly fixed to the doors of Hollywood studio offices, but it had been utterly destroyed by time, neglect, and the harsh weather. He carefully entered the bungalow. The interior was immediately dark, saturated with a heavy, stale odor, yet surprisingly clean, as if the space had been hastily, violently vacated only moments before. The intense, metallic scent of hot concrete, which he had registered during his first visit, was now overwhelmingly strong. Inside, there was nothing left but thick layers of dust, and the clear tracks of hastily removed furniture and equipment. Michael proceeded straight to the basement, where his assistant's hint suggested the entrance to the hidden safe vault should be. The entrance was cleverly disguised to look like a pair of ordinary, heavily worn doors. He applied pressure to the exact spot where, according to the conceptual blueprints, the bungalow's basement wall should have been, and the entire section gave way immediately. Behind the false wall was a small, dusty, hidden room. He thought, with a surge of adrenaline, "This is it! The evidence!" Inside the tiny, concealed room, there was only one significant item, a heavy, massive filing cabinet, permanently bolted into the concrete floor. Lying carelessly on top of the cabinet was a small, forgotten laptop. When Michael cautiously opened the lid and powered it on, a single, unread message immediately flashed onto the screen, addressed to his official, highly private corporate email address, the one used exclusively for ultra-secret financial transactions. Body. "You never truly knew what we were selling you, did you, Jordan? This was never simply about the money. This is fundamentally about knowing your proper place. This specific land parcel is permanently reserved. Did you truly believe that $150 million gave you the automatic right to rewrite the established rules of Los Angeles? A worthless inn cannot purchase a villa in our designated neighborhood. Do not dare poke your nose into matters that are definitively above your pay grade. Otherwise, this paperwork hiccup will swiftly become your greatest, most devastating public humiliation. Your silence is your single best weapon. Learn to use it while you still can. Signature, SS, presumably Sterling Sr. Michael's cold fingers trembled violently on the phone. He nearly dropped the device in his shock. This was no longer a protracted financial dispute. This was a direct, explicitly personal, racially motivated attack, expertly camouflaged beneath the impenetrable guise of a routine business transaction. This chilling twist immediately revealed the entire story was not a simple matter of real estate fraud, but a deep-seated conspiracy of concealed discrimination, an entire system designed and executed to humiliate him. Michael immediately dialed his lead corporate lawyer. "We are going public immediately," he stated, his voice now utterly calm, steel, and decisively resolute. "But we are not using Twitter. We are strictly using the cold, hard law. Find me every single zoning document and legal file related to the golden corridor surrounding this specific plot of land. They didn't just sell me a worthless property. They were deliberately holding this parcel for a much greater, sinister purpose." The hero was beginning to feel an absolute, profound solitude. His intense isolation was no longer merely professional. It had become deeply personal and psychological. The wider social circle of Hollywood gradually began to distance themselves. People actively started avoiding him, treating his claims of a massive network of corruption with visible skepticism and profound distrust. They only saw Michael B. Jordan, the successful, highly compensated actor who had simply overpaid for a bad lot, not the genuine victim of a targeted, racist scheme. He honestly thought he had witnessed every possible evil in Hollywood. But this time, he was profoundly mistaken. This wasn't merely a simple actor's game. It was a ruthless, high-stakes game of political power. This was a different, far deeper kind of malignancy. Michael successfully located a dedicated lawyer, a woman working within the state prosecutor's office, known for her dogged, relentless fight against urban development corruption. Her name was Elizabeth Cullen, and she seemed to be the only person in the entire city who genuinely listened to his whole story. "They always use celebrity against you, Mr. Jordan. They know it will be incredibly difficult to convince a jury that a man of your wealth could possibly be a legitimate victim." Her tone was strictly pragmatic and brutally honest. She cautiously promised to investigate and help, but her gaze was noticeably guarded and apprehensive. 2 days later, Michael and Elizabeth met secretly back at the bungalow. The palpable atmosphere of impending catastrophe hung heavy and oppressive in the stagnant air. Outside, the wet wind howled ominously, and the deep, low rumble of passing traffic sounded distinctly malevolent. They meticulously analyzed the extensive legal documents, cross-referencing the generic cadastral numbers against the detailed architectural blueprints. "Look closely," Elizabeth instructed, pointing her slender finger at the extremely small print within the zoning map. This specific parcel was very recently rezoned from a residential classification to commercial, with the added designation of strategic development. This kind of reclassification never happens randomly. It represents a colossal, secretive government subsidy. Someone knew definitively that you would not be permitted to build a residence here, but they ensured you possessed the legal right to purchase the lot. Their investigation quickly uncovered that the strategic development classification had been rapidly approved by the city council on the exact same day Michael had executed the initial pre-purchase agreement. Sterling's knowledge of the scheme was total and complete. He had successfully sold Michael a desirable plot that was secretly slated to become a crucial component of a major commercial project, a project Sterling could then later acquire at a deeply discounted price once Michael inevitably gave up on the manufactured paperwork hiccup. The situation reached its fever pitch when Michael discovered the final, most crucial piece of evidence. He returned stealthily to the bungalow late one night, equipped only with a small, powerful flashlight. He instinctively felt that this specific moment was the only sphere where he held a true advantage. Quiet, completely unnoticed, determined action. He recalled Sterling Jr.'s brief, careless mention of the protected space. He successfully located it behind the massive filing cabinet, a small, barely noticeable hatch embedded in the concrete floor, leading into a cramped, dark underground chamber. There, hastily covered with a filthy, ragged cloth, lay a sealed, heavily covered in dust and damp mold, personal ledger belonging to Sterling Sr. This was no official document. It was a private, handwritten journal where Sterling meticulously recorded all his illegal schemes and financial maneuverings. Michael carefully opened the journal, his hand shaking slightly with intense anticipation. On the very first page, a short, ominously prophetic phrase was inscribed. "Nature never forgives arrogance, but Los Angeles forgives an awful lot, provided you know precisely who to feed." Michael rapidly flipped through the journal's pages, using his phone's camera to record every single line of text. The pages detailed the names of city council members, specific dates, and exact amounts of donations, and a painfully clear, concise description of the entire fraudulent scheme, the creation of the digital twins, and the subsequent repossession of the land. But the most terrifying discovery was that this exact scheme had been executed successfully before. He genuinely believes that his silence is a dignified strength. He fundamentally fails to grasp that the quietude of a star is the greatest gift he could ever present to us. For $150 million, he has simply purchased himself a very expensive lesson in abject humility. We urgently need this specific plot for Project Echo, and his funds have already been effectively funneled into a highly protected asset. He is now, essentially, our perfect witness. Who the hell do you think you are, you damned in? Do you even know who I am? And that's like you are only supposed to do the dirty work. Michael's realization was complete and terrifying. Sterling had not just defrauded him. He had ruthlessly used Michael's substantial funds to secretly finance his next, even more massive crime, Project Echo, a colossal, clandestine undertaking that absolutely required this specific land parcel as its crucial, non-negotiable key element. He quickly snapped the journal shut. In that pivotal moment, his characteristic quiet strength utterly shattered, instantly transforming into a cold, unbreakable steel of resolve. Michael could no longer simply endure this betrayal. His mind was racing wildly, consumed by rage, yet he miraculously held his physical composure. He finally grasped the horrific scope. This desperate fight was no longer merely about recouping his money or preserving his dignity. It was about protecting the entire neighborhood slated to become the immediate, unsuspecting victims of Project Echo. Suddenly, the low, mechanical drone he had heard days ago became violently loud and much closer. From directly above, inside the bungalow, there was the sharp, panicked sound of splintering wood. Sterling Jr., who had been remotely monitoring the hidden camera feed, had clearly seen Michael discover and record the damaging ledger. In a moment of pure, blinding panic, he threw something heavy and razor-sharp onto the floor above, violently shattering the old, dirty window located just above the concealed hatch. "This is the absolute end of the line, Jordan!" Sterling Jr.'s furious shout echoed clearly from above. "You broke the code and went where you absolutely shouldn't have gone. You have no idea who you just messed with, damn it!" Then, the unmistakable, loud roar of a powerful industrial generator violently kicking into life. In the cramped underground space, the air immediately became thick with the acrid smell of gasoline fumes. Michael instantly understood this was a planned trap. They intended to eliminate him right now. Michael desperately clutched the incriminating ledger to his chest. But his only exit was now completely blocked, and the tiny chamber was rapidly filling with thick, suffocating smoke. This was far more than simple corporate robbery. This was a chilling attempt at murder. And the true, unimaginable storm was only just beginning to break. The roar of the industrial generator was now a furious, suffocating scream. The fumes, thick and heavy with the acrid scent of raw gasoline, instantly felt like a vice clamping down on Michael B. Jordan's lungs. He was trapped in a space barely larger than a pantry, the small, hidden hatch's only way in, and now, thanks to Sterling Jr.'s quick, panicked reaction, his only way out was blocked by the frantic movement and shouting above. His fight-or-flight instincts, honed by years of training for action roles, took over, overriding the paralyzing fear. He knew he had less than a minute before the toxic air rendered him unconscious, sealing the ledger, the evidence, and his life into this underground tomb. He clutched Sterling Sr.'s journal, the ledger of sin, and his phone, which was still recording, to his chest. He spun quickly, sweeping his powerful flashlight across the dusty walls. The ceiling was concrete, the walls were poured masonry. No weak points. Then he remembered the smell. The intense, metallic scent of hot concrete. He directed the beam downward. The massive, bolted filing cabinet was secured deep into the floor. But the floor itself was unusual. Near the wall, where the original bungalow's plumbing might have been, the concrete had a distinct discoloration, almost an oily sheen. This was the source of the metallic scent he had noticed earlier, the result of something leaching through. Michael dropped low, ignoring the burning in his eyes, and tested the area with a hard kick. The sound was not the solid thud of foundation, but a brittle, echoing crack. The section of the floor near the cabinet's base was not the original slab. It was a rushed, poor-quality patch job, likely placed to quickly conceal the hatch he had found. He needed a wedge, something heavy and sharp. His gaze fell on the massive, antique safe door, cleverly built into the wall to look like two worn wooden panels. He didn't have time to pry it open, but its hinges were rusty and protruding. In a desperate, adrenaline-fueled move, he grabbed the thick, steel hinge pin from the lower panel, a relic of the structure's long-forgotten past, and wrenched it free. The metal shrieked in protest. With the heavy steel pin in hand, Michael attacked the weak patch of concrete beside the filing cabinet with focused, rhythmic force, channeling the pure, contained violence of a boxer's combination punch. Crack, crack, crunch. He gouged a deep crevice, then levered the pin underneath, applying his full body weight. The cheap concrete, designed only for a quick cover-up, splintered and burst. A jagged, dark hole, just large enough to squeeze through, appeared. He inhaled one final, painful lungful of smoke-free air from the hole, secured the ledger inside his expensive coat, and dove headfirst into the new, desperate exit. He landed hard in a narrow, muddy crawl space, thankfully clear of smoke. Above him, Sterling Jr.'s screams were muffled and distant. He scrambled through the cramped, wet earth beneath the bungalow's foundation, moving toward the front yard, where he knew the foundation gave way to soft soil. He burst out into the cool night air like a ghost rising from the grave, gasping for breath, mud and sweat coating his face. Michael didn't stop to look back at the billowing, poisoned smoke. He kept the ledger secure and ran straight until he reached the relative safety of the nearest busy street corner. He immediately sent a single, coded text message to the only person he trusted, Elizabeth Cullen. Echo. Ledger. Bungalow. Now! I'm out. Don't call. Come clean. Elizabeth Cullen, the state prosecutor, was skeptical but pragmatic. When she saw Michael, not the pristine celebrity, but the muddy, soot-stained man holding a water-damaged ledger and shaking from adrenaline, she knew his story was terrifyingly true. They met in the sterile light of a secure police interrogation room. The ledger of sin spread out on the cold steel table. "This isn't just about your $150 million, Michael," Elizabeth said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper as she pointed to a column of cryptic figures. "This is about the strategic development rezone. Sterling didn't want to build a warehouse. He wanted to build a filtration plant. A filtration plant for what? Michael asked, his mind racing. Elizabeth flipped to a page detailing massive shell companies and specific, heavy-duty industrial equipment transfers. Look at the dates. Look at the names. Project Echo is their code for environmental containment and hazardous output. The Sterlings, using their deep connections within the City Council's zoning committee, were going to use that specific plot, your plot, as the staging and processing site for a massive, illegal dumping operation. Sterling's entire scheme clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The bungalow site was not just a symbol of discrimination, it was a necessary choke point. The golden corridor surrounding your land holds some of the most expensive real estate in Los Angeles, Elizabeth explained, tapping the map. But just behind it, and connecting directly to the old, unmonitored storm drains, is a massive, old, unsealed municipal dump site. Sterling's plan was to illegally reroute toxic runoff from that dump, process it through a hidden, temporary facility on your land, and then sell the plot back to the city as a clean, strategically secured commercial zone, pocketing a government subsidy worth billions. The profits were immense, and the risks, to them, were non-existent. Michael looked at the map, seeing not property lines, but lives. If this plan went through, the toxic waste would eventually leach into the water table of every surrounding neighborhood, wealthy and poor alike. The racism was merely a cover, a convenient way to publicly humiliate a person of color while pulling off the biggest environmental crime in LA history. They banked on his silence, believing his shame and desire for privacy would make him give up the land quietly. "And my $150 million?" Michael asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Your money," Elizabeth said grimly, "was used to purchase the necessary silence of 3 key city council members and fund the startup costs for the illegal machinery. You financed your own humiliation and their criminal empire." With the ledger of sin providing concrete evidence, names, dates, and account numbers, Elizabeth's team had everything they needed for a full-scale federal indictment. But Michael insisted on one final, crucial condition. The arrest had to happen at the bungalow. It had to be undeniable, public, and a complete reversal of the Sterling's power play. "I need to draw Sterling Sr. out. He's too cautious to come near a police station," Michael reasoned. "He thinks he won. He thinks his son took care of me last night." Elizabeth was hesitant. "It's too risky." "He's dangerous, Michael." "He is arrogant," Michael corrected. "And arrogance is the one weakness a calculating man cannot hide. He wants to witness my final defeat. He wants to gloat over the worthless land he forced me to buy." They set the trap for the next evening. Michael, acting under Elizabeth's guidance, sent a single, carefully crafted, submissive text message to Sterling Sr. from a burner phone. To Sterling Sr. Message: "Mr. Sterling, I concede. The fight is over. The property is yours. I will be at the bungalow at 7 p.m. tomorrow to sign the final quitclaim deed, waiving all rights. Please come alone to finalize my absolute surrender." Sterling Sr.'s reply came instantly. "I always knew you'd understand your place, Mr. Jordan. You just cost yourself some time. See you tomorrow." The trap was laid. The following evening, the bungalow looked exactly as it had before, gray, forlorn, and intensely pathetic. But the silence that night was a deceptive mask. Hidden across the street, in unmarked vehicles, Elizabeth Cullen and a contingent of FBI agents waited. At precisely 7 p.m., a black, heavily tinted sedan pulled up to the curb. Sterling Sr., immaculate in a tailored suit, stepped out. He looked like old money, radiating cold, untouchable confidence. He paused, looking at the broken window of the bungalow, and smirked. He clearly believed Michael was hiding inside, terrified and defeated, waiting to sign his ruin away. Sterling Sr. approached the fence, where the hateful, scrawled note remained. He took a photo of it with his phone, savoring the moment. "Michael! Come on out, boy! Let's finalize your very expensive lesson in humility." Sterling's voice echoed, loud and condescending, across the desolate street. "I brought the paperwork, and I'm in a hurry. You wouldn't want to anger the city council, would you?" The front door of the miserable, gray bungalow creaked open. Michael B. Jordan stood framed in the doorway, but he was not the broken, soot-stained victim from the night before. He was wearing a dark, simple suit, his expression one of absolute, terrifying calm. He held nothing in his hands, but the steel in his eyes was heavier than any weapon. "I am not signing anything, Mr. Sterling," Michael said, his voice quiet, steady, and utterly amplified by a hidden microphone feeding directly to the FBI command center. Sterling laughed, a loud, grating, victorious sound. "Oh, are we going to play the hero now, Jordan? You wasted $150 million to buy yourself a death trap and a racist slur. You are a man of loud action on screen, but your silence off screen is what makes you harmless. Your silence is a gift to us, a gift you have already given." Michael B. Jordan took a single step out of the doorway, his form now fully visible in the glow of the flickering street lamp. He looked directly at Sterling, and the silent, terrifying calm in his eyes finally broke, replaced by cold, final resolution. "You mistook my silence for weakness," Michael stated, his voice ringing with a deep, final authority that commanded attention. "But my silence was merely the time I needed to listen. To listen to the names in your ledger. To listen to Elizabeth Cullen. To listen to the truth of Project Echo. You sold me a bad lot, Mr. Sterling. But you sold the entire neighborhood a poisoned future." Sterling's laughter instantly died in his throat. His composure evaporated. The sheer audacity of Michael knowing about Project Echo was a greater shock than any police siren. He frantically reached for his phone, but it was too late. "Arrest him!" Elizabeth Cullen's voice crackled clearly over a loudspeaker placed strategically in a trash can across the street. Suddenly, the street exploded with flashing red and blue lights. FBI agents swarmed the area, emerging from the unmarked vans and cars. Sterling Sr. was pinned against his black sedan, screaming threats and denials as agents slapped the cuffs on his wrists. The final element of the trap was sprung simultaneously. Across town, Sterling Jr., caught completely off guard as he was about to board a private jet, was also taken into custody, the audio recording from Michael's phone, capturing Sterling Jr.'s voice ordering the deadly generator trap, the final, irrefutable evidence. The city council, facing imminent arrest and political ruin due to the explicit details in Sterling's ledger, collapsed like a house of cards, leading to a wave of resignations and indictments. Days later, Michael B. Jordan stood at the same curb, the fog replaced by clear, hopeful morning sun. The old bungalow was gone, demolished under the order of the newly appointed special prosecutor. The hateful note on the fence was removed, replaced by an official city sign designating the plot not as strategic commercial development, but as the site for a new, fully funded community center and park, designed specifically for the underprivileged youth of the area. He had fought the battle not with the loudness of fame, but with the quiet, enduring weight of the law. He had lost $150 million, but he had restored justice and secured the safety of a community. He looked at the empty, freshly tilled earth, the spot where his golden castle was supposed to stand. He realized Sterling was right in one malicious way. Michael did not belong here, at least not in the way Sterling intended. The place wasn't meant for a fortress of gold, but for a foundation of change. The media circus finally arrived, but this time Michael opened the door and spoke not from a script, but from his deepest principles. The world listened not to gossip, but to the cold, undeniable truth of corruption, racism, and greed. The quiet, principled actor had finally achieved his legacy, a sanctuary built not of steel and glass, but of justice and community. When he finally turned to face the cameras, the pain in his eyes was replaced by quiet triumph. They had laughed at his silence and his loss, but when he opened the door and showed them the truth of the ledger, no one, not the Sterlings, nor the corrupt council, nor the cynical media, laughed anymore.